Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for convening this hearing. As I look out and see miners and families of miners, it brings back a little memory. My great-grandfather came from Ireland, and they worked in the mines in Pennsylvania. And three of them, I think it was three of them, the story's a little sketchy, but died of black lung disease. And as bad as things are, there are some tough conditions now. They were a lot worse then. But I'm glad they came over. That's how I ended up in this country. Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for convening this hearing, and I welcome today's witnesses. In particular, I'd like to thank Ms. Lee and Ms. Hamner for joining us and providing what I expect will be a moving and important personal testimony. I believe this hearing will build upon the mine safety activities our committee and this Congress undertook last year. I look forward to our continued dialogue, and I think that as we begin our discussion today, it's important to take a look at where we've been and indeed where we're headed next. The most prominent mine safety activities this committee engaged in last year occurred when our Workforce Protection Subcommittee held a series of oversight hearings and briefings, during which we heard from federal mine safety officials, mine workers, representatives from the mining industry, and members of the House. An initial oversight hearing served to provide a general overview of mine safety and health regulations from the perspective of federal regulators, representatives of the mining industry, and those who work in mines. And another hearing gave House members from both parties, including all members of the West Virginia delegation, the opportunity to share their unique perspectives on mine safety. Simultaneously, through briefings from federal mine health and safety officials, complemented the information gathered at these hearings. Aside from these informative hearings, however, our oversight activities actually began months before that. Immediately following last year's tragedy at the Sago mine, our committee brought the U.S. Labor Department of the Hill to detail for members and staff from both parties the events that occurred, the Mine Safety and Health Administration's planned response, and how its investigations should proceed. Shortly after, we worked with Representative Shelley Moore Capito to successfully request that the Department immediately reverse an agency policy that barred public access to factual information under the Freedom of Information Act, such as inspector notes, until a mine safety case had been closed. Our philosophy on this was simple. Families of miners impacted by the tragedies, Congress, and anyone with a stake in the mining industry should have the best and quickest possible access to meaningful facts about this case. After these months of oversight activities, it became abundantly clear that we needed better mining communications technology, more modern safety practices inside U.S. mines, and improvement of enforcement of current mine safety laws. And each of these needs were addressed comprehensively by the Mine Improvement and New Emergency Response Act, otherwise known as the Miner Act. The bill passed the Senate without a single vote in opposition, and it enjoyed support from two witnesses before us today, Mr. Roberts from the United Mine Workers of America and Mr. Watsman from the National Mining Association. I would be remiss if I did not note that because of some partisan wrangling by the party serving in the minority at the time, this measure did not advance to the President's desk as quickly as it should have. In fact, without this wrangling, MSHA's implementation of the Miner Act would be further along than it already is. Nonetheless, politics aside, I was pleased to stand beside members of both parties, as well as mine workers, their families, and industry officials last June to see this landmark bill signed into law. Today, more than a year after our oversight hearings on the tragedies in West Virginia and Kentucky, we have seen progress. MSHA has met each of its congressionally mandated deadlines to implement the Miner Act, and similarly, labor and industry leaders have been working in good faith to bolster mine safety through available and ever-changing technology. Just as my colleagues do, I am hopeful that this law can and will be implemented just as quickly as possible. And in the months ahead, just as we demonstrated last year, I'm convinced this committee will continue to track this issue closely and fairly, with the attention it deserves and with an eye toward all stakeholders. Mr. Chairman, I'll be the first to admit that this is an emotional issue. Having dealt with it as chairman of the committee last year, I know that fact all too well. But I believe, and I think we'll see this very clearly today, that our nation's mine workers are better off today than they were a year ago. And it is a collective effort of all stakeholders, employees, workers, academics, consumer advocates, and government that has made it so. If we allow ourselves to lose sight of this fact, then this hearing will break with the record of action we accomplished last year, and no one's purposes would be served. Again, I thank you for bringing us together this morning, and I look forward to hearing from each of our witnesses.